Good evening, wrestling fans, and welcome to the Two Bros Wrestling Show. Again, a one bro edition. It's been a while, but Doug, who would normally like to be with us, if you watched last week's show, you heard him explain how watching anyone perform the maneuver, the Canadian Destroyer, breaks his brain. And then no sooner he said that unfortunately this week, both Zelina Vega on SmackDown and then Roxanne Perez at last night's Vengeance Day, both both did the maneuver, and unfortunately, Doug was not able to recover from it and had to be hospitalized. So hopefully he recovers in time to be back next week. In all seriousness, get well soon, Doug. And we're going with a special edition tonight, not just a One Bros edition, but an all news edition. I know our original topic was supposed to be the wrestling for sale, and this is such a well-researched topic on our part. It's a big show with the pending sale of WWE hanging in the balance, that we're going to go and look historically at all of the biggest wrestling transactions in the history of the sport and how they may relate to a soon-to-be sale of WWE. That is definitely a two bros subject that will be better when we have the both of us here. So whether it's a special edition that we throw out there or just reschedule, we're going to do that for another time. So we do have so much that happened in the world of wrestling this week, including more news about this pending sale of WWE, as well as Rumble fallout on the way to WrestleMania, a lot of big AEW news as well as some goodbyes that we need to get to. So let's just get right to it and do the opening bell. Let's start with the Royal Rumble, fallout from the Rumble, as well as what is new on the way to WrestleMania. So WWE is reporting that this year's Rumble event was the most watched in the history of Royal Rumble. And additionally, the gate was the largest gate in the history of the Royal Rumble, with more than $7.7 million in ticket sales. That is, by any measure, an extremely successful Royal Rumble. Now, critically speaking, Two Bros, we both liked it. Now, how your mileage may vary depending on what you think of the winner. In particular, the men's Royal Rumble match was won by Cody Rhodes. And despite how hot Cody Rhodes was before he went down to his injury, in his absence, WWE, by necessity, had to pivot to Sami Zayn's storyline that has taken wrestling by storm. And internally, it's right now being reported that the current plan is still that Cody Rhodes is going to challenge Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. Obviously, anything can still change, but none of the events that has happened with Sami Zayn, including the fallout and the announcement for a match that will happen at Elimination Chamber, right now, nothing in WWE's plans are indicating that they have anything in store other than Cody Rhodes and Roman Reigns, and that very likely Sami Zayn's story with the bloodline might continue through other members of the family at Mania, but it will not be going through Roman Reigns. Again, let's wait and see how that pans out. On the women's side, we saw this week that Rhea Ripley named her opponent for WrestleMania, and she chose Charlotte Flair, which of course leaves that dream match between her and Bianca for a later date. A lot of us were hoping that that would be her choice, and instead she went for a Charlotte Flair rematch. Last time these two tangled, it was not with the benefit of the large crowd or the audience at WrestleMania. Rhea Ripley is a way more developed character now than she was back in those days too, so it should be a better contest. Maybe not my a choice for a Rhea Ripley opponent, but you certainly can't argue with the fact this is probably going to be a very solid contest, and by the time they build to it, we'll all be looking forward to it. Pat McAfee returned at Royal Rumble, as we discussed last week, and apparently his return was not just a surprise to us. Apparently it was a secret to even those backstage in WWE, including Michael Cole and Corey Graves. Reports this week are that both Graves and Cole had planned to call the entire Royal Rumble by themselves. And it's unclear right now if McAfee is coming back for multiple appearances. I know he was not on SmackDown, or if this was truly just a one-off. Maybe he comes back for premium live events. But for the one event he did come back to, it was a surprise even to his fellow commentators. Last Rumble nugget before we move on in the news. But did you like that Mountain Dew pitch black match? If you did, first, I have to ask, what is wrong with you? And secondly, if you did enjoy that match, you're going to love this news. But apparently these corporate sponsorship matches have become so lucrative that we should be expecting more of them, and more of them very soon. In a interview with the Hollywood Reporter, the senior VP of global sales and sponsorship for WWE was quoted that he did not want to give away any of the surprises that they had on the road to WrestleMania, but that he was particularly excited about a sponsorship with Cinnamon Toast Crunch. I wish this was the Onion, but no, you heard me right, fans. A sponsorship with Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and we're not talking about just commercials. Apparently, according to this executive who is quoted, there is a match that he is keeping under wraps, that the WWE is keeping under wraps, that is tied into this sponsorship, and that it is planned for WrestleMania. So, in other words, if you have ever wondered what it would be like to watch Bray Wyatt wrestle in a bowl of milk, you may have less than 60 days to actually get that wish to come true. Please God, no. Turning over to Vince McMahon's return to WWE and what that means for a impending sale. WWE reported their earnings this past week, and their Q4 earnings were up. And I know this was pre-Vince coming back, but this definitely is a result of all the turmoil that Vince caused last year, and the idea in Wall Street that this turmoil is going to eventually lead to a sell. Wall Street remains very bullish on WWE, and the revenue for Q4 was up 325.3 million, which was up by 5%. This closes the books on WWE for 2022, and across the entirety of the year, they saw an increase of 18% to $1.3 billion. That's billion dollars. That is the highest in the company's entire history. Of course, during the announcement of the financial earnings, when they have these investor calls and then they open it up to questions, naturally the return of Vince McMahon and what that may mean for the future of the stock as well as of the sale, all of that came up and was addressed, I guess I should say very diplomatically, by the son-in-law. Triple H handles a lot of these investor calls now. He's usually on them. And in the instance of being asked about Vince's return, he was nothing but praise that he lavished upon his father-in-law, and how excited he was to once again be working with Vince and to have his creative mind back in the mix in whatever capacity, even if it is only at the board, again, stressing that Triple H himself is still firmly in control of creative. What to make of this? What more is he going to say, right? I mean, his wife, who was leading WWE while Vince was gone, pretty much said all she needed to say with her sudden retirement completely from the company upon his return. Triple H, sort of stuck in the middle on this, is of course going to say nothing but nice things about Vince, and hopes that once the day is done and the sale is over, and maybe Vince does sell off into the sunset finally with a pocket full, his pockets all full of cash, then maybe Triple H can remain with the company and doing the creative part that he loves. But until then, I imagine he's just trying to make nice. But he definitely was saying that it was great to have Vince back and how good it is for the company. We will see. Related to this finance call and the 2022 earnings of WWE, Nick Khan, the current CEO, sole CEO after Stephanie's retirement, did the rounds with the business press to talk about the financial results as well as the impending sale and future of WWE. And Nick dropped a couple of interesting tidbits in a particular one of these interviews, and particularly the one he did with CNBC. The first thing that he said that got everyone's attention is that a sale could happen within the next 3 months. Now, most of the industry sources that we had been quoting up until now, the just general wisdom around these sorts of things is that don't look for anything to happen within at least 6 months. And now Nick was this week talking about less than half that time. So we would be looking at not very long after WrestleMania itself if they do end up holding true to this storyline. To this timeline. As far as Vince goes, there was an interesting tidbit that Nick Khan brought up about that as well. And that is, when asked specifically, he said that Vince was open to completely leaving WWE if the deal is right, and that is what the buyer wanted. I would take that obviously with a grain of salt, but it does speak a lot to what they're trying to do to help increase interest from potential buyers, to maybe assuage any fears that potential buyers have, because there is a lot of noise out there that perhaps there are buyers being scared off by the fact that they do not want to be associated with Vince McMahon, that especially as he forced his way back into the company, and what we know of all the allegations against him that caused him to leave in the first place, that you do not want to be associated with Vince McMahon, nor by a company that Vince remains a controlling shareholder of, or a large creative part of, or any of the sort. So Nick is at least paving the path to a possibility that if the deal is good, and the part of the deal is we'd give you X amount of money if Vince would go away and let us have the toy all to ourselves, then yes, that might be something that could conceivably happen. Again, I would take that with a grain of salt, as Vince has already shown the idea of walking away and doing so quietly does not seem to be in his character. But maybe with enough money, he can find it in his heart to leave it to someone else. But we'll see and continue to follow the saga of WWE's potential sale, and we'll do so more when we have our broadcast on the wrestling for sale and the history of these large promotions. Are you a WWE Network watcher on the free tier of Peacock? Well, if you are, hold on to that subscription, because it is no longer available to new subscribers. This was a move that was done extremely quietly, and it is a little bit of a surprise because the free tier was one of the ways Peacock was distinguishing itself from its many streaming competitors. It seems now the only way to get that free subscription is if you're grandfathered in on it, or if you had a premium subscription and you attempted to cancel it, you would be offered the lower cost tier that was ad supported, and or stay subscribed with the free tier. So it appears that they're now using the free tier only as a way to keep people subscribed and not walking away altogether. We'll see how this goes. Peacock has become a slightly more profitable company over the last year. They've had some successes after having some trouble right out of the gate, especially in the streaming world, which is so incredibly crowded right now. There was a lot of individuals who thought that Peacock would be among the first to fold, and they have actually, with the help, honestly, of WWE as well as the Olympics, have exceeded some expectations. They started putting first run releases of just out of theater type movies on, like you would normally see, head straight to Netflix or maybe HBO Max or something. Now Peacock is getting some of those as well. So a combination of all these things, and the future's a little bit brighter than it once was for Peacock. But definitely, if you enjoyed watching the free tier of WWE content on Peacock, Definitely do not cancel that subscription, or you will not be able to gain that back. It is worth noting, of course, that the WWE premium live events were notably excluded from the free tier. So don't think you're going to get the pay-per-views for nothing. Speaking of streaming services, while we're on the topic of it, AEW is contemplating launching their own. And this is something we have talked about a lot in the past here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show, and how that is one huge advantage that WWE has over its competition. And that for many people who have gotten used to the lower price point of a WWE network, now Peacock network subscription, that going back to the old model of spending $50, $60 on a pay-per-view is discouraging, and that AEW would benefit from having some sort of streaming service on their own. This is a nugget of news that was buried deep in a large profile that Bloomberg did this past week on Tony Khan, titled "The Billionaire's Son Coming for WWE." It is a fascinating must-read that I would suggest that for all of you, not only would you find it interesting as wrestling fans, it would be a good backgrounder for the talk we plan to be having right now on this evening as our main event topic. So before we reschedule our show on the history of wrestling companies being bought and sold, definitely go check out this Bloomberg story. It really gets into a lot of what it takes to operate a wrestling company and the finances and things behind it. Back to the AEW streaming service, though. The Bloomberg article had a single sentence in it that stated that one of Tony's next goals for AEW is a streaming service, and that it would likely be with their current partner, Warner Brothers Discovery, who operate TBS and TNT. However, additional reporting by other outlets that are not Bloomberg since that article came out has noted that the mistake being that it does not appear that that would be Tony Khan's preference, that he would rather not partner with Warner Brothers Discovery. I mean, it makes sense that they already have a large streaming presence with HBO Max, soon to be probably going to be just the Max when they merge HBO Max with the Discovery Plus service. But still, it would make sense with AEW being in the family to have like a hub on HBO Max or whatever the service will end up being named. But that would be much the way that WWE Network is housed within Peacock. However, Tony supposedly would prefer to go completely alone and have a standalone streaming service. Think the way that the WWE Network used to be, or if you're an international subscriber to the WWE Network, the way that it still is. Obviously, pluses and minuses to either approach. Harder to go about it on your own, which is why WWE took the money and gave all the back end control over to NBC Universal. But we'll see what AEW potentially does, is because this could be a big development this year, something to watch as far as how AEW continues to try to build and grow its company. And especially in the face right now of turmoil in WWE, there's a lot of opportunity for them to gain ground. This would be one way to do it. Another way to do it, pivoting to our next story, AEW is getting ready to start house shows. This is pretty crazy that for most of wrestling's existence, house shows were where the money was made. And then, of course, television and pay-per-view started to take a large chunk of that change. But the live performance aspect of wrestling has always been part of the business model. But in the modern age, it was not necessarily something that AEW aspired to do right off the bat. They have been around for 4 years and have only had one real non-televised event up to this point. And that is all about to change as they are launching what they are calling AEW House Rules. That's what they have decided to brand their non-televised house show circuits. And it is going to start on March 18th. And that is right now the first and only announced date. And that'll be happening in Troy, Ohio, in a venue that holds around 4,000 people. And this is probably what we should be expecting for these AEW House Rules shows, because the press release that they did when they announced this is that they were going to be appearing in intimate settings, is the way that they put it. Intimate is a nice way of saying mid-sized to small venues, maybe not the type of larger arenas where they'd been hosting Dynamite and or Rampage. That's probably a smart move. AEW over this past year has seen some decline in ticket sales, and a lot of that may have to do with the fact that they tend to continually go back to the same cities. Maybe they're hitting those cities a little too often and feeling a little tapped out in those towns, that ticket sales have started to decline. So if you want to, possibly one good reason for why AEW would be going to the road and doing shows that were not before the cameras, well, you're hitting markets that you've never hit before, that you've never hit with Dynamite and Rampage, and there might be a hunger in those markets that it doesn't exist in ones that you maybe go to 2 or 3 times a year right now, and it might help get that live revenue back up. So from that aspect, it makes a lot of sense to hit these markets the way they are, the ones that AEW have yet to visit, and just selfishly here, hoping that Huntington, West Virginia, which is close to Doug and I, and hopefully that would qualify as a mid-size venue in a big wrestling town that WWE tends to do well when they do shows there, house shows there. So hopefully we can see an AEW house show coming to someplace near you. According to a report from Fightful Select, ROH TV tapings are scheduled to occur in Orlando this month. That's right. This report states that talent is under the impression that ROH is going to be filming at Universal Studios, which of course is where AEW has taped a lot of AEW Dark episodes. Tony Khan stated back in December that ROH TV would be launched after Wrestle Kingdom. And the reason that the timing was to be after Wrestle Kingdom, and that was because New Japan Pro Wrestling was going to be a part of ROH television. Despite Wrestle Kingdom having occurred now more than a month ago, nothing has been said by Tony since that time. However, what we do know is that New Japan recently announced that they will no longer be taping TV episodes for New Japan World Strong, which was their American brand television show that was filmed at their Los Angeles dojo for American audiences. And the timing of this announcement from New Japan seems to be lining up with the word that Ring of Honor television is getting ready to start up, and might be an indication that whatever it is that Tony was alluding to as far as a working television relationship between Ring of Honor and New Japan might be ready to happen. We will definitely keep following this one, and when more details are known as to exactly how this pans out, we will report it to you here on the Two Bros Wrestling Show. New Japan. So while we're on the topic of New Japan, one of the world's greatest wrestlers is now a free agent. Kota Ibushi has officially parted ways with New Japan after a year, really, of being either sidelined due to injury or delayed in his comeback because he was at war with New Japan itself. Famously, there was a dust up between the two sides that led into some folks getting suspended, the office saying some things they shouldn't publicly about Ibushi airing his dirty laundry on the company and public too. It was just embarrassing for all sides, and probably then that makes it for the best that Ibushi is moving on at this time. He already has his first indie dates, and so if you are a fan of Kota Ibushi and have never seen him live, just because he's primarily spent most of his time touring in Japan, you're going to get some chances to see him in the United States. He's going to be working 2 dates for Game Changer Wrestling during WrestleMania weekend. And so there is supposedly interest in Kota Ibushi by the big two, that WWE and AEW both would be happy to have him. However, those close to Ibushi say that he prefers one-off appearances like the ones he's doing for Game Changer Wrestling, as opposed to being a full-time performer for, locked into a deal. I would guess, considering the way his New Japan relationship ended, he's probably not overly interested at this time in signing any sort of long-term contract. So don't expect him in AEW or WWE anytime soon, but a fan can hope. Let's see. From a free agent to someone who no longer is a free agent, and that is the Dirty Dango. If you remember Fandango and don't know the Dirty Dango persona he's been using since then, he is now officially signed with Impact Wrestling. So if you're a fan of Impact Wrestling, you're going to get more Dango on your programming. This, of course, is likely going to end Dirty Dango's appearances with the National Wrestling Alliance, which is where one of the places he has been plying his trade without a long-term contract, but he's been making appearances in the NWA for most of the time since he's left WWE, and I'm presuming that it will be coming to an end because of the Impact signing. Richard Holliday. If you're familiar with Richard, he is the longest tenured now wrestler in all of MLW, 5 years, and honestly is such a talented talker, has a great look, and really good ring acumen that he would seem to be a perfect candidate for either Triple H or Tony Khan to snap up. He was a founding member of the dynasty with MJF. MJF has gone on to bigger and greener pastures. And so it would have been fair to think that Richard Holliday would be on his tails shortly thereafter. However, Holliday has been absent from television and MLW programming for a while, and it was revealed recently and in a pretty emotional on-air video that he had sent in for MLW's television product about 2 episodes back, and he revealed that he had been sick and had been diagnosed last year with Hodgkin's lymphoma and is currently undergoing chemotherapy. On the bright side of this awful news is that he says that he is doing way better in chemotherapy than the doctors had thought he would do. And so he is hopeful that he can beat this. But again, cancer, extremely serious situation as far as supposedly it reported that it could be as a stage 4 diagnosis that Holliday had received back in June of last year. But his optimistic report of how his chemo is going should give us hope that he can rebound from this. And we all from here at the Two Bros Wrestling Show definitely wish Richard Holliday all the best in his continued treatment and recovery. And then finally, as far as the news goes, we're going to end with some more sad news, and that is the wrestling world losing another classic name. This past week, Leaping Lanny Poffo, known in WWE, or F at the time, as the Genius, and the real-life brother, of course, of Randy Macho Man Savage, the legendary Randy Savage. Leaping Lanny passed away this week. He was only 68. Lanny and his brother Randy were born into the business. They were the sons of professional wrestler turned promoter / territory owner Angelo Poffo. And Lanny worked the territories, primarily the NWA related territories, but all over the world really for years before finally following in his brother's footsteps to WWF, where his Genius gimmick had him reading, if you recall, custom pinned poems before each of his scheduled matches. No cause of death has been revealed, but rest in peace to the great Leaping Lanny Poffo, an act I always thought was terribly underrated. And with that, folks, we're going to head straight to our big finish. No main event topic tonight. We had so much news to cover, and with Doug's absence, I definitely do want to save our conversation on the business side of professional wrestling and all the acquisitions, sales, and things that we can make analogies to with what is about to happen in WWE. We're going to book that for a later date and want you to stay tuned for it. We're going to go straight to our big finish, where if this is the first time you're joining the show, this is our 1, 2, 3. We give you the botch of the week. Number 2, we're going to give you the performer of the week, and then end with the 3 count, and that being our match of the week. I want to start with the botch of the week, and this is a quick and easy one. But I love the work of MJF. Maybe, arguably, the best heel in the business today. Nothing against this performance this past week on Dynamite, but this is just one of those comical botches, and that is, why was he so orange? I mean, he made like Donald Trump look like he could have used a day at the beach or something. Like it was such in high def. It was such a bad fake tan spray job, streaky spray job that MJF had going on. I had to just call it out that that's not the way you want to get your heat, is by making yourself look ridiculous. But he looked a little on the ridiculous side. Performance of the week. My performer of the week this past week was none other than Cody Rhodes. And I'm not talking about the fact that last Saturday he won the Royal Rumble. I'm talking about the work he did this week, and that being when he walked out on Raw and gave just a genuine promo. And I think that is what Cody has going for him right now. If you really look at the timeline of Cody's journey over the last year and a half to 2 years, it's quite amazing. For all of the goodwill he had for most of his tenure in AEW, there towards the end, fans were turning on him and the gimmick and were actually booing him and causing him to fight against the reactions to the point that he really couldn't anymore, and he started to embrace some heel tendencies. And of course, before that really got to play itself out, comes the drama of him returning to WWE, where he was welcomed as a hero, became a really big deal. Looked like he was going to get the push he never got the first time around. And then he goes down to injury. And when one injury happens, when something bad happens to some, it is opportunity for others. And an opportunity that probably would not have been there was handed to Sami Zayn. And of course, Sami Zayn took that ball and ran with it farther than anyone thought he could, or that the office itself thought that they would keep going with. And now you have this dilemma. You have your hero come back in Cody Rhodes, and I really legitimately wondered if fans would boo a Cody Rhodes Royal Rumble victory, just because, as good as that story is, the making good on the dream, as it were, the Dusty never getting his just due in WWF at the time, never tasting that world title gold in WWF, never headlining a WrestleMania in WWF, that continuing his father's journey is a wonderful story. It just happened, unfortunately for Cody, to get sidetracked, and a hotter story and arguably a better story that fans more maybe want to see now. It happened in his absence. So Cody comes out this past week on Raw and delivers a promo that very, very easily could have got him booed. He could have had Sammy chance. He could have had go away heat, because the white meat baby face, the just overly good guy, does not play all that well in the modern wrestling environment. And it was part of what was starting to chafe at the character when he was in AEW. But Cody Rhodes can pull off the white meat baby face because there is so much genuine emotion that he can draw from. There's so much of his father, hard times, if you would, in Cody Rhodes, that he can tap into that. And when he taps into that, he is as likable as anybody in the business. And the promo he delivered on Monday night was, I think, one of his strongest, knowing that there's someone else that maybe fans at this point would rather see in the position that he is in. He did not shy away from that, and nor did he shy away, though, from his mission statement from the time he came back. And that is that I am coming to help fulfill my father's dream. And I'm going to do that at whether I'm cheered or booed, whether Roman Reigns is in my way, whether Sami Zayn is in my way, regardless of what happens, regardless of who's the most popular, who's the whatever at the end of WrestleMania, the champion at the end of WrestleMania is going to be one Cody Rhodes. Not only did he deliver the promo masterfully, the fans' reaction was exactly what you would hope it would be. There were no boos. There were no mixed reactions. It was nothing but straight ahead love for the passion that Cody was showing in his promo. And that is how you start to build this match towards WrestleMania. Will it hold? Especially depending on what happens at Elimination Chamber and the X factor that is how Sammy continues to play into this, because it just seems like it would be anticlimactic for Roman Reigns to have a title for 3 years only to lose it at the pay-per-view before the biggest pay-per-view. So the general wisdom would think that Roman Reigns is going straight to WrestleMania as champion. But as we mentioned at the top of our show in the opening bell, there is no indication that WWE is going to pivot from Cody Rhodes versus Roman Reigns, regardless of how hot Sami Zayn is right now. So, victim of his own success, Sammy. We will see if anything that Sammy can do, or the fans' reaction to Sammy, it will force WWE's hand in any way to change the destination for him at WrestleMania and somehow get him involved in that world title picture. But for the time being, Cody Rhodes coming out, not knowing what kind of reaction, handle it like a champ. And we're ending tonight's show with our match of the week. Usually we give you my match of the week, and I get to tell you why it's better than whatever Doug had selected. But tonight it's just the one match because it's just the one bro. There was a lot of good wrestling on this week. I had penciled in my notes Hangman Page and Jon Moxley, their match that they had this past week, the third and final in their trilogy, was great. But I got to say, if you did not see Vengeance Day last night, the NXT brands return to the road, watch it. From top to bottom, it is a very strong show. I think that it's worth your time because so many of these young talent have never performed in front of crowds as large as this. They haven't left the state of Florida in 3 years. It was March of 2020 was the last time that NXT had an event on the road. I was lucky to catch one of the last ones before the whole world shut down. Doug and I did. But to see these men and women in front of a large house, and the house was hot for what was going on screen and in that ring. And so it elevated everything, and you could feel the men and women feeding off of that energy. However, out of the gate, the very first match that NXT has done on the road in 3 years not only set the bar, it blasted through the bar, it blew away everything else that happened that night, as well as everything else that I'd seen in wrestling up until the last night. And that is, you have to go back and see Wes Lee versus Dijak. If that is the only match you see this entire week, that is the one that will suffice, because you had false finish, and sometimes I think false finishes can be overdone, but you had 5 or 6 minutes of very believable near falls and back and forth. Big man, of course, Dijak doesn't just wrestle like a big man, but he was, doing the big man strong stuff against a Wes Lee who was flipping and flopping and flying all over that ring. But then, in the same way that Dijak can fly, Wes Lee showed that he could pick up a man like almost double his size and put him down in a brain buster. I mean, he was showing strength in addition to fortitude and acrobatic high flying skills. It just had a little bit of everything for the North American Championship, and it was absolutely fantastic in a wonderful way for NXT to return to the road and live touring. So go check out Wes Lee versus Dijak and the rest of Vengeance Day. And yeah, go back and watch that Hangman Page and Jon Moxley match as well, because that was pretty fantastic. With that, folks, we are done for another episode of the Two Bros Wrestling Show, One Bro Edition, with a update on all the news from this past week of professional wrestling, and there was a lot of it. We will be back next week, and next week's broadcast we will be previewing the final premium live event before WrestleMania. It's hard to believe that this soon after Royal Rumble comes Elimination Chamber, and then a long gap to build towards WrestleMania. So knowing next week is the big game, we are not interfering with the Super Bowl. We're going to be on at a special early time. So if you watch this live, If you watch our live broadcast and don't catch us on replay, then you definitely want to tune in early, and we will get you pre-gaming with us. You'll get your wrestling dose in before you start your day full of football, and definitely stay tuned to our channels, and we'll let you know more about when we reschedule our Wrestling for Sale broadcast, because that is going to be a good one also. And then we'll be in March before you know it, and it's a ton of WrestleMania programming that we have in store. Cannot wait to share it with you. Again, get well, Doug. Thank you, fans, for joining us, and tune in again next week. And until that time, I'm Kevin saying, have a good week of wrestling. See you next Sunday.